Okay, awesome. So we are live, and welcome to another Run Wild with Us, Ask Us Anything. I am Lisa Kastner. I am the founder and executive editor of Running Wild and RIZE Presses, and I am here with two of our phenomenal editors, Rod Gilly and Amy Hardy. And I'm going to bet that within the next 5 minutes, because he's amazing at showing up within the first 5 minutes, we'll also have Ben White, who is one of our editors and acquisition editors. And we are here with you guys Thursdays between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. So you can ask us whatever the heck you want. And I'm not kidding when I say that. I mean, we fielded some really wacko questions and some incredibly in-depth comments. So, guys, bring it. We are more than happy to talk about whatever you have that's on top of mind. And if you're not sure how to do that, all you have to do is go ahead, put your questions in the comments section. And of whatever venue you're watching this, you could be on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I think that's all of them. LinkedIn. Whoops, sorry, one more. LinkedIn. And we will go and review. I'll repeat the question that you posed within that comment section, and then we'll take turns in responding to your questions. And I've got to tell you, man, you guys come in with some really phenomenal questions. So I'm really, really excited to hear what you bring to the table. And it's like I'm psychic. I said, boom, Ben will be here within the first 5 minutes, and boom, here he is. Ben
I got
White.
3 minutes to spare.
I know, it's amazing. It's amazing. A total miracle. So just, per our usual, how are you guys doing? What was your week like? Let's start with Ben. So what's going on, man?
It's been busy.
Well, that was a cop-out answer. You can leave now.
I can get here and leave within the first 5 minutes.
I'm just kidding. Well, I feel you on the busy thing. It was funny because
just got off that's where I was. I got off the call from this is going on right now. It's Anthology Proud to Be.
Oh, cool.
And, I'm in it, but I wasn't reading tonight, so I got to duck out and join you all.
Where can folks get it? Because I'd like us to be able to put the link to it in the comment section.
Let me see if I can get the link. Can I post a comment? Yeah.
Yeah, you should be able to. Okay. I hope so.
Yay! Amy, what's been going on? I'm going to duck out.
No, you're not. You're not allowed to go.
Well, I'm over on another site. That's all.
Okay. Great. So, Amy, how are you doing, young lady?
I'm doing pretty well. It is super wet in the south. We're getting just tons of rain, and my son, he got sick this week, so we've been doing quiet things kind of around the house, which is nice because I have a lot of editing work to catch up on. It's funny how that happens. Whenever I need to slow down, I usually, have something to slow down for. So nice. That's been nice. Yeah. And this weekend I did meet with my friend. We recorded our podcast episode, and it was really fun. We just chose a book, made a drink, and just sat down and started kind of talking about it. So it's called Reading as a Vibe because we wanted it all to be, a vibe with a playlist and our drink. Nice. So yeah, had a lot of fun this weekend with that.
Do you have a link to that as well?
Yeah, I'll share it with you as well.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Okay. Definitely share the link. I'm sure folks would love to check it out. So
cool.
And Rod, how about you? How have you been?
Oh, doing real well. Have had some excitement with my writing. That new little story I'm working on is just running like crazy, and I'm having a ball. Awesome. On the editing side, the 3 works that I'm helping authors with, 2 of them are in this area that I'm sure each of you and every editor loves, the middle of the book. Have you ever noticed that's where most of the problems show up? that's where you have the most editing, or at least the most suggestions you need to make to the author. I would say what, 70% or somewhere in the middle of the book. Do you guys think so?
I don't know, Amy. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like maybe halfway through I see like something starting to slow down. Usually in first drafts, just because you're working out the story, that's totally normal. And usually it has to go back. You got to go back further than that and look at some of the plot and see how you can kind of tighten all that up. So yeah. It's always like you have momentum until you realize how far you still need to go, and you're like, oh man. Yeah.
How about you, Ben?
I would agree. The farther into the book you get, the more consistency there has to be, and that you have to watch for. Because wait a minute, this person never did that. Why are you telling me they did that now? And so it's got to flow and not throw up any of those mental hurdles for the reader to get mad at you about. Because we don't want the readers to get mad. But I found a way around it with my own novels. When I get about halfway through, I just quit writing.
That's not the same thing. No.
I avoid those conflicts.
Well, Teja says, hey guys. CJ says, good evening. Hey guys, awesome to see you both. Angelique says, I find the soggy middle happens all the time. And it's funny, like, I agree with everyone, and especially Ben's comment on, it's almost like a lot of people, and I wouldn't say it's everybody, right? Because I've encountered several novels, and this I usually find when someone's been working on it for a really long time, they get so caught up in their own backstory for that story that they leave in like 30, 40 pages that just don't need to be there. And that's usually like, the very beginning, and it slows down the whole work. And I find that, like I said, especially those works that people have been working on for a really long time, because they can't see it anymore, right? They're so caught up in what their original vision was and in everything that they've been working on, they just can't see where the true narrative arc is. That said, a lot of times authors, they get so caught up in making the opening perfect that the first 25%, 30% are just humming along. And then all of a sudden you start in the middle, and all of a like, to everyone's points, either it slows down or they're bringing in characters that never existed before, or, in the first third, this person was in their 20s and now they're 85. And you're like, what? Like, no, you can't. It doesn't work that way. You've got to have some kind of transition here, So, and also typos get worse. I find, like, all of a sudden there are these typos that you're like, dude, you were fabulous. What happened? Come on, we can do this, So yeah, 100%. Teja says, roughly, how long does it take to write a book? Man, I'm throwing that in Rod's lap first.
Well, let's see. On the happy side, I will say I wrote the first draft of my first novel in 3 months. Boy, that really sounds great, doesn't it? My first novel's still not done. And I was on a YouTube show a while back, and encountered a really cool person on there that was a writer, author. And he openly said that it took him 25 years to get his book out there. So somewhere between 3 months and 25 years, there's your answer.
Amy, what have you got?
Well, National Novel Writing Month claims you can do it in a month. So I don't know. I've done like really rough drafts in a month, but I wouldn't suggest it. I went a little crazy with trying to get it, done in a month. And honestly, it happens, however long it takes. You really can't rush inspiration and ideas, and it's honestly not your job to have inspiration. It's just to almost like receive it. It's just to be there so that when the inspiration comes, you can try to capture what that is. So if that may be discouraging because you can't control it, but it's also kind of a load off of our backs, right? So we don't have to come up with all the ideas at once, but we should be there to watch it unfold and to capture it in some way. So I don't know. I find that really refreshing, that it's just going to take however long it takes. And I think for, beginning writers, that's really hard to hear, because it's hard to have a project go on and it not be finished for a very long span. And you'd almost not see progress for a very long time. You're still working on it, and then you think you're going somewhere, and then you realize you have to go back and do all these other things. So it just takes however long it takes, and you got to be uncomfortable with the unfinished mess that it is until it's done.
That's amazing. What a great answer. How about you, Ben? I mean, Ben!
Ditto, ain't it?
Ditto.
I actually heard that Sylvester Stallone wrote Rocky in a weekend. And which I can believe, because if you know the characters and you know the story and it's flowing, it can be done. Personally, the novel I wrote, The Kill Gene, it took about a month, and then much longer to get it published. I know that. But, that's not unusual. And then it really depends on if it shakes out. If it's a novella and it's done, and so don't think, well, it's got to be longer or shorter. The work is done when it's done. And so a collection of poems, I can do a collection of poems in a week with a theme that I've attached to. But that's probably not the kind of book you're talking about, because it's poetry. It's a practice in rejection.
Well, that's sort of true in today's society, unfortunately. But yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I can still do it. I can still write it.
Yeah. Honestly, I heard the same thing about Rocky, but I also heard that what he would do is he'd submit it to like a producer. They would reject it. He'd say why, and then he'd rewrite it, and then he'd go to the next guy, and they'd reject it, and he'd say why, and then he'd make a revision based on that. So he just used the submission process as a way as his beta readers, basically.
It's like a draft.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't intentional that they were his beta readers, but that's just sort of how it worked out. So I agree. I'm another one of those, like, ditto. Is there such a thing as tritto or quattro? Tritto. The very first book that I ever wrote, I am so thankful for my then sister-in-law, who was so kind enough to read the absolutely crappiest thing she's probably ever read in her entire life. She actually read the whole thing. I think it took me about a year to write the first draft. And even as I was writing, and this is when I was still purely a pantser, in reflection, it started off as very literary, and then somewhere it started turning into horror, and then all of a sudden it became a mystery, and it ended up like a crime mystery that anyone who grew up watching 40s and 50s old black and white TV shows, it was that kind of crime mystery. So there's no way anybody knew they were reading the same damn thing from the start to the end, because I basically wrote like 5 different stories, not even full plots. It was more like vignettes that were somehow connected by the characters. But that to now, I think it takes me about 4 or 5 months to finish a really solid first draft. And then I have several individuals who are kind enough to be my beta readers, and they give me some absolutely phenomenal feedback that's incredibly helpful. But I'm going to go back to something that a dear friend of mine, and Amy and Ben and Rod have all already said. it takes as long as it takes, right? I mean, there are some writers who can knock things out in like 2 months and it is almost sheer perfection. And then there are others that, they start writing something and it takes them, 25 years.
Yeah.
And you just don't even know. There's no way that you can really figure it out. I mean, there are some authors that they set it to a deadline. Every 5 years they're going to put out a new book, and for them that's fast, and that's okay. That's great. It also probably means they have a day job, because I don't know, you're not going to be making enough off of upfronts and royalties to to pay the bills, but it's you do it whatever way is best for you. So Teja says, what are your favorite opening scenes that you have read in a book? With this one, why don't we start with Amy?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I love anything that starts off with like a really strong image. There's just so many different like novels that kind of make you dive into a character. I can't even pull out one right now.
All good.
Yeah, just because I just love the almost like the opportunity to trust the reader to pick up on this character when you're in this certain scene. However it starts, we're already going to know all these things just based on where they are, who they're talking to, how they're speaking, how they're acting in that scene. So anything that starts off with a strong character, I'm instantly pulled into.
Cool. Nice. Great answer. How about you, Rod?
Well, I've often heard like advice, and some advice is better than others, that a writer should really make their first 10 pages gripping, worthwhile. You can, I know from experience, you can lose a reader in 10 pages. The books that I find most interesting, I'm going to refer to one in particular, but I can't swear it's the first scene. Ben might be able to help with that. But a good example that comes to mind is Far Out, a recent book that came out. And that very early on, if not the first scene, it's very early, you immediately have this gripping scene where there's been a terrible car crash and there's this lady laying there. You don't know if she's going to live or die. And there's somebody there just totally happened to be there by chance and doing all that she can to try to save this lady's life. And it's like immediately the reader is like, wow, what's going to happen? And I think in almost any genre, any story I've read, I really enjoy stories that come out of the gate getting my attention. I don't really need 30 pages of scenery. I can get a little bored with that right off the bat. I like those books that say, hey, you're going to enjoy this. And so that's kind of what I gravitate to.
Cool. How about you, Ben?
A couple come to mind, and some are, when you start a book off with "Call Me Ishmael," and you're already making a biblical reference of an exile. Okay, I'll call you Ishmael. Where are you going to take me? Or the dichotomy of it being the best of times and the worst of times. But it goes back to what Amy and Rod both said. It's something draws you into that story right away with, well, how could it be both? So tell me more. Explain that to me, and you're caught. There was a novel, and I can't remember the name of it now, but I remember the first scene. That's what matters. And it was about a Native American who was a child at the time, and he was on the plane with his mother. And you're thinking, okay, this is going to be a growing up story, and then suddenly the mother is hit and killed by a train, and left him alone. And what's he going to do now? So I think that any beginning that can draw you into the human experience is a good beginning.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, Trudeau again. I mean, it's and when we say, well, when I say draw me in, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone has to be shot, that someone has to be killed. It doesn't mean that, it just means that there is something within those first lines, that those first paragraphs that open up a question for me as a reader that I want to have answered. And that could be an intellectual question. It could be some type of physical narrative question. It could be, to Ben's point, it could be a philosophical question, but it's a question that I then feel compelled to have the author hopefully answer for me, or at least answer enough by the end of it that I want to read, book 2 or whatever the case may be. So, yeah. Let me see. We've actually got a lot of great questions. I'm just looking at. Okay. Next one. This one actually is. I love this question too. Tejas, you're just asking all kinds of good stuff. Do you have any experiences where you met your favorite authors? So for that one, I think we'll start with Ben.
I did meet an author once, and she suddenly became not my favorite author.
Oh,
Sometimes be
Aww.
careful. But see, she went on to win the Nobel Prize, so I guess she
Holy
couldn't
crap.
see what she was doing. But speaking of the Nobel Prize, I sent a collection of poems to Gunter Grass before he died. I haven't heard much from him since he died, but
Wow.
yeah, let
wow.
that sink in. But we had a correspondence. Actually, his reply was from his doctor because he wasn't in good health. But it was a great uh, interaction and very encouraging to hear back, because I'd sent him some poems and said, do with these what you will, but it's poetry from the cosmic plane, and he had his doctor write back and said the cosmic plane is where poetry belongs. So it's very encouraging and rewarding to hear that from the German writer.
Wow.
But yeah, the other one was in a workshop and face to face, and I'd never heard of her before anyway. Well, I had, but not since.
You're like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. How
She didn't
about
care either, so she didn't like my work, and so we made it mutual.
Oh, well, there you go. Mutual hate, I guess. There you go.
Yeah.
How about you, Rod? Have you met any of your favorite authors?
Actually, yeah, I've actually had the pleasure of meeting some super great authors. One really stands out intensely, and if anyone who follows me already knows this, so I'll keep it as concise as possible. But I've said before that when I was young, I dabbled in writing and wrote a lot of short stories and poems, got them published in school publications and local newspapers and things like that. And I was just a kid in school. And someone stole 5 years of my writing. And in those days, it was pen and paper, no backup files. But 5 years was just gone. So I just gave it up. And even at my best back then, I never thought of myself as, quote, a writer. Didn't really know anything at all about the industry. So many years went by, and I had the pleasure of meeting T.S. Hoddle. He's an excellent sci-fi writer. And I met him, and we were talking, and he was so far advanced. It was like talking to Ben. I understand it. I don't know, 50% of what he says. I'm a kind of a simple man, but Mr. Hoddle, was sharing with me some of his journey of what it takes to become a writer and a published author. And I think the turning point for me, the thing that mattered the most, is I held one of his novels in my hand, flipping through the pages, looking at the cover, reading the back cover blurb. And it just lit a fire inside me. And I remembered those teen and early 20 years, how much I enjoyed that. And honestly, it was that moment, holding his novel, that I decided to make a serious career out of being a writer. So that was a big deal to me.
Wow, that's awesome. How about you? How about you, Amy?
I've met a handful of like really good authors who were very, very nice. I don't think I've ever met an author I didn't really like in person, but one that really stands out is I was able to meet George Takei, who is on Star Trek, and he published a graphic novel memoir about him growing up in the internment camps during World War II in America. And he really wanted to publish his memoir, but make it accessible to kids so that they could learn about history that's not really taught in schools. And I just thought that was so cool of him to kind of think about our young people and to be excited and to have the faith that they would be interested and they would want to read his books, you know, his story. And he was really, really nice. His husband was there and he was like mingling with people in line that were getting autographs, and he was just so nice. I don't know. It was just a really wonderful, like supportive environment that he was fostering. And again, he was just really excited about having kids kind of learn history, but then also be encouraged to tell their story as well.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I have to admit, I've met a lot of my literary heroes just because I went through a long period where I'd say almost every summer I went to a writer's program. So I've been to Breadloaf, I've been to Chautauqua, I've been to Iowa. I've been to Ohio Writers Workshop. And even my MFA is from Fairfield University. And the entire reason I went to Fairfield in full transparency was I was a huge fan of Da Chen. And Da was one of the instructors there. And they actually invited me because I had, again, been blessed to be accepted to multiple MFA programs. And so it became one of those like, okay, well, which one do I want to go to? Because now all of a sudden I'm actually accepted to a couple of different programs that I'd pined over. And so I when I visited, he turned out to be such an incredible human being and just as well as an amazing writer that was, for me, was like a huge game changer. Like, of course I'm going to go here. Like, give me a break. But like I've met Matt Johnson, Victor Laval, Alma Katsua. I met her at the Horror Writers Association's annual conference. I kind of came up and I don't like putting it this way because I was trying to think of like, okay, so what amazing writers do I know that I kind of fangirled over? And there are ones that if I wouldn't have come up with them, I would have fangirled over them, if that makes sense. So like I was blessed enough to know them and meet them when they were still coming up and read their works, like their really early, super early works, even in quite a few cases before they even started, writing longer form. And so I feel really honored to call them, friends. And, but, Jamie Ford, who wrote on Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet. And I was honored to publish actually the short story that novel is based on. And, I got into an argument, believe it or not, with the other editors who were members of that. It was an online magazine, and they were like, we can't publish this. I think one guy actually said it's too ethnic. And I was like, you're an effing idiot. That's, this is a brilliant work. You've got to, how could you not publish this? And, we literally got into a fight, and they finally agreed to publish it. And I actually personally reached out to Jamie, which is how we became friends. And I said, look, I've just got to tell you, if anyone ever tells you stop writing, tell them to fuck off, because they're wrong. Like, you are meant to write, and you are meant to tell these stories. And you know, and then he was incredibly, incredibly kind and mentioned myself and the publication in his acknowledgments for Hotel in the Quarter of Bittersweet. So if anyone hasn't read this, it actually was a global phenomenon. It sold, I think it was over 1 million copies. He did a global, like a world tour associated with it. And he has since published, I think, 3 or 4 more pieces that have been just as, you know, enormous. And then I also had the incredible honor to meet and hang out with Wally Lamb. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but he is another one who's just a complete and utter sweetheart. And we just really hit it off from the minute we met. And I too have also met some authors who were raging jackasses, but luckily it's been few and far between. I've met more who were super kind. Oh, Joyce Carol Oates as well. I actually got to break bread with Joyce Carol Oates, who I was shocked at how just a normal human being she was, because this was at a point where she was already iconic. So I was just like, you know, she's like, she was just, you know, like, this is very good chicken. Like, we're just sitting there at a at a writers conference during, you know, the VIP dinner, and you know, she was just so incredibly incredibly kind. And in, you know, the back of my head, I'm like, do you understand how iconic you are? Like, do you understand that you're already a legend and you've barely broken 30 or something like that, you know? So I mean, I just think it's an honor whenever you have a chance to meet icons like that. So Angelique asks, how does working with a press like Running Wild help with project completion, or does Running Wild only consider finished projects? I can take that question. So Angelique, actually, that's a great question. So like I'd say the majority of publishers, we really only review works that have been completed. And we prefer that you submit works that not only have they've been completed, but you as the author feel as though it is done. So typically that means that you've already gone through a couple of rounds of editing associated with it. Because to be honest, and actually Rod and I were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier today, we have so many submissions. I mean, like, we still have, I want to say 15 works that we already accepted. Some of them we accepted as long ago as late 2022. And these poor guys have been waiting for an editor to be assigned to them for that long. And it's just because we've got so many amazing works that we've accepted or that we've been privy to be submitted to us, that, you know, if your work's not done and you don't feel as though it's polished enough yet to be published, the likelihood that we're going to pick it up is probably pretty low. And I think that's probably going to be true for any independent mid-size, and definitely for any large publisher. That will definitely be true. And in all honesty, and people are always shocked when I say this, I actually, when we have authors who come to me and say, you know, you've taken so long to get me an editor, you know, and they pitch a fit, I'm like, you should be using the fact that your piece has already been accepted somewhere to go to another publisher that you maybe you admire or you're interested in, and say, hey, my work was accepted over here. I'd love it if you check it out. I think it's a great opportunity for you if you feel as though we're taking too long. But also understand, any publisher that is working in that standard, in more of a classic model, it's going to be at least 2 years before your book hits the shelves. And that's not necessarily including time with the editor. So it's just stuff to keep in mind. Tejas says, have you ever seen any Indian movies? Of course. Like, give me a break. Of course. I mean, who hasn't seen? Well, okay, let me back off on that one. Ben, Amy, Rod, have you guys ever seen an Indian movie?
Yeah. Oh.
From Bollywood movies, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know how you couldn't have seen a Bollywood movie. So I don't know. Anyway,
I'm really impressed. Netflix right now has a bunch of Indian movies that are, you can stream. It's really, really cool. I really like kind of going and seeing what's out there just in, all over the world. And sometimes I'll even Google like, what's the top movie in this, this country, and just go watch it just because I like, inspiration you can get anywhere. And yeah, I try to look in places like that where I have access. But maybe most people don't think of. So yeah, if you have any suggestions, let us know. What should we watch?
Oh, I agree. Definitely. If you have any suggestions, like totally, like give it up, man. Angelique says, I think that novel sounds amazingly cool. Well, thank you. I think all the novels that we've talked about so far, unless the person's a jackass, have been amazingly cool. Teja says, is there any author you consider a genius? As for me, I am going to say this so not correctly, Elichiro Oda, author of One Piece, a genius. He has been writing One Piece for over 25 years and releasing a chapter every week. Oh, wow, that's interesting. Hey, Tejas, if you have a link to that, definitely put it in the chat. I'm sure others would be interested in checking it out. How about you guys?
My son is a huge One Piece fan, I have to say. He is addicted. He's watched like hundreds of shows. I know there's like over 1,000 shows in the series, and then there's like 9 movies, I think. So yeah,
cool.
Our family has been working our way through One Piece this year.
Very cool.
Yeah.
How about you, Rod? Do you have any authors that you consider to be geniuses?
Yeah, I think all of us would have people that fit in that category. For me, it's a kind of a wide range. It spans from people like Stephen King, Ben White, and it goes down through the many Rod Gillies. And there's a guy or a girl sitting in a little room with an antique computer, pounding away on their first draft of their first work. And that person is a genius. And I'm talking to you. Can't wait to see what you bring out. And that's the truth, actually.
There you go. How about you, Ben?
I was initially when I finally sat down, I said, I think I'll read East of Eden. I was expecting it to be a James Dean movie, just in a book.
Okay.
But it was very rewarding to see how Steinbeck could use the language and say things without saying things. And East of Eden, I think, was his best, even better than The Grapes of Wrath. But Chapter 7 of The Grapes of Wrath is some of the best poetry in U.S. literature. So read that again, everyone. It's all about car dealers. But I also like James Carlos Blake and the way he presented a story. It's the book is called The Friends of Pancho Villa. And each chapter is a kind of a witness statement from people who knew Pancho Villa and rode with Pancho Villa, fought against him, fought with him, married him. And so the chapters themselves are just individualized perspectives on Pancho Villa, but together the collection comes together to give you a great biography of Pancho Villa. And that's James Carlos Blake. It was a very unique and innovative way to present it. I've seen a poet do something similar with The Last Time I Saw Amelia Earhart. I can't remember the poet's name, but she did it with a series of 10 poems of people talking about the last time they saw Amelia Earhart. And then it comes together. And of course, it's such a familiar story, but this is kind of a backstory to her disappearance. And so it's a very innovative way. So the geniuses are out there. And sometimes they appeal to you, sometimes they don't. But you still appreciate their approach to what they're trying to do and what they do.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great point. I've read so many geniuses that actually that's why I used to always read the National Book Award. Not that I don't still read the National Book Award, but I have found that, at least for me, typically those who are honored in that capacity are pretty. If they're not a genius, they're pretty close to being a genius. And yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, it's all about, like, I love reading them because then I get to deconstruct what they did that made this so groundbreaking and compelling. And then it's a lesson for me in how to write and how to tell, the groundbreaking narrative. And actually, Rod had brought this up to me there before about, like, rules of writing. And that to me is also what makes a genius is they're breaking the rules left and right. And, it's a great reminder for us that there really aren't any rules, right? There's baseline, right? There's baseline, what I would prefer to call guidance or recommendations of how to construct a narrative. And, everyone should learn them and master them. But in a lot of ways, the reason that you're even learning them is so that you can then break them in a way that's not only effective, but compelling and forces others to challenge themselves. So, All right, that was my soapbox. Okay. Tejas says there was no drop in quality of his chapters, and every chapter is better than the previous one. Yep. I think Amy, you and Tejas are in complete agreement on that. Kim Brenner says, I got to meet Judy Blume. Now that's cool. Yeah. That's very cool. Tejas says, what was the best piece of advice anyone has given to you? Talisa, please shout Ben whenever you move the question to Ben. Oh, okay.
There's an exclamation point there, Lisa.
So, yeah. Excuse me. All right, then I'm starting with Ben.
Yeah, it's just, you've gotten so used to it. I'm going to have to start putting 2 exclamation points.
I see that, obviously. So what's the best piece of advice, Ben, that you've ever gotten from somebody?
It was something that Alan Michael Parker told me in the MFA program when I first started it in the University of Tampa. We were talking about poetry and the using the end rhymes or using the end rhymes as potential poems that need music to turn into a song. Mm-hmm. And he told me, writing a song and writing a poem are 2 different worlds. And it made sense. It cut the chain to say, okay, I can be freer, and I don't have to think that each poem needs music. I can transcend that effort trying to write Dylan poetry that can be sung. Because I write a lot of poems that are really bad Dylan, but are really good Donovan.
That's awesome. How about you, Amy? Have you ever gotten any great advice?
I really like the Ira Glass quote where he talks about all beginners, they get into it because they have really good taste. And they're quickly discouraged because they realize their talent is not where their taste is. And there's this huge gap that will exist for a long time, where your skill is just going to have to take time to work up to where your tastes are and where you'll be satisfied with the work that you produce. So I think that quote is what it's been very important in just my journey as a writer and also an editor, and trying to kind of reassure authors that, like, it doesn't mean that you are awful if your novel's not there yet, right? It just means that there's a lot of work that we got to do. And that's how kind of when you're finished, is when you have a project and you say, okay, I've done all that I can. And you might even see like little things that you could fix, but yeah, it's that realization that, okay, this is as close as my taste is, you know, I am satisfied with what I am giving out of this piece. So yeah, I've always took that and really liked it.
Excellent. How about you, Rod?
It kind of plays into what Amy said, and earlier when we were talking about how long does it take to write a story. The best advice I've ever heard, and I spread it everywhere I can, I fully believe in it, is that a writer has absolutely got to have patience. You've got to have patience with yourself, with the people you work with beta readers, with editors, with publishing houses, every step of the way, every little detail. I guarantee you it's going to take longer than you initially think it's going to take. And I believe if you can have, and believe me, I am not a man known to have patience. When I was doing construction work, I was like, I want this done last week. I'm not a patient man. And it took me a little while to learn it. But the best advice I've ever heard or ever could give another writer: be patient, take a deep breath, get a sip of coffee, take your time on whatever stage you're on, and put your heart into it, your effort into it. Worry more about making it the best you can make it rather than how long it takes.
Nice. I want to say I had two bits of, I guess, advice that I received when I first started really hardcore writing. And one was I attended the Philadelphia Writers Conference, and they had an option where you could submit like 20 pages of some piece, and one of the instructors would review it, you know, and then it would basically get workshopped as a part of like a smaller group of authors. A lot of writers conferences during this period offered this kind of thing. And so we went through and you know, I submitted a short story, and the instructor came to me afterwards and said, hey, you know, I need to talk to you. And I thought, oh God, I'm in deep shit, right? Like, oh, I must have really blown this one. And he was just being super polite. And so we went to a side conference room, and he was like, look, I just got to tell you, you were meant to write. Do not give up. It may take you until you're 50 to actually get published, but that's just the nature of the beast. And, you know, I just really want you to don't get discouraged. It's very easy to, you just really need to just keep writing. And honestly, in that moment, I really needed to hear that, because I had already gotten so many rejections, but I had already been published quite a bit in terms of like journalism. And I had done a lot of like what we call internal communications work. So, you know, all those articles that you see written within your large corporation. When I was an intern in college, I was one of those people who was knocking those babies out for you. So, and then the other bit of advice that I received, it was actually what I was doing when Rod was talking, and I apologize for being rude. I was trying to find his name, but the first instructor I ever worked with at Breadloaf Writers Conference, he gave this advice to everybody in our workshop. And if for those who don't know, at Breadloaf, you have to submit, I think it's 15 pages of a work to get accepted. And then typically that is used to be workshopped with an author, usually a pretty significant note. A lot of these guys, I mean, they've either, if they haven't won the Pulitzer, they've been nominated for it, or some similar amazing, you know, award. But they're all of some type of note or acclaim. And I remember he said to us, the whole reason that you are learning how to write craft is so that you can break the rules. And I just thought, wow, you know, and it was funny because in that workshop is when I realized all of the greatest pieces that I truly loved were by people who were just breaking rules left and right. I just didn't know they were necessarily like hardcore rules that, you know, others were saying, well, you can't do that. And he was like, no, as soon as someone says you can't do that, you got to figure out how you can do it. Right. Because it's not a real rule, right? But you've got to learn what those, craft rules are in order for you to then be able to go beyond them and really expand the experience. So I just thought that was brilliant. Angelique says, is your model strictly print, or do you also work on options for TV and film? That is a great question, Angelique. So Running Wild and RIZE, actually what we do is we publish the piece in ebook, paperback, and audiobook forms. And then we do typically get the licensing rights, and we have an entire team and that works on identifying what stories might actually be best to be picked up for, whether it be, TV, film, translation, so on. Because to be honest, I think we already have been, what is it, like 130 books we've published in the last 8 years, something like that, or not even 8 years, 7 years. So, and that includes short stories and novella anthologies. So the number of stories that we have the rights to, represent the authors in this capacity is probably closer to like 200, if not more. So, so we basically we keep track of what's going on in the market to see what ones of the stories might do best with different producers, or different, houses or what have you. And we also have an agency that represents Running Wild LLC in general. And so what they do as well is they keep a lookout. So when they're going out to different conferences and when they're talking to producers and directors and so on, and they're saying, oh, I'm looking for crime fiction that's a Western and a female lead, right? If they might, I'll suddenly get a phone call saying, hey, do you got this? And then, we'll go through our catalog and see if we have anything that fits that. So great question. Tejas asks, sorry, this thing jumps around sometimes. Okay. Oh, we've got a movie suggestion. 3 Idiots, available for free on YouTube with subtitles. RRR, available on Netflix. And the movie that won an Oscar for Best Original Song last year. Oh, that's so cool. All right, we've got to check those out. Angelique asks, what's your opinion on indie publishing versus the big 3 trade publishing versus going with a publisher such as yourself? What kind of profit margins can authors expect to see with a mid-sized publisher? Woo! Man, that was a lot in there. Do you guys want me to take that, or do any of you guys want to take a shot at it?
I'd say you're best equipped to answer that. That's what a lot of that's over my head.
I would still say that it comes down to the story itself more than the publisher and the marketing effort. Peter has said a couple of times, another acquisition editor, 5% of the job is to get the book written. The 95% is to get it marketed and out there. So that's the advantage that you would talk with, especially with your profit margins. But good stories with a lot of passion, a lot of attention to it will take off no matter who published it.
So Angelique, these are all great questions, but I'm gonna put a spin on this, basically to Ben's point, right? Understand that the publishing world, and I want to say entertainment and the storytelling world in general, is changing dramatically really fast, right? And I just saw an interview at Sundance with the producers and directors of Everything Everywhere All at Once. And they were talking about the fact that, once upon a time, well, let's go to now. You can go on YouTube now and you'll find amazing short stories and full-length movies that no one has ever heard of. I mean, groundbreaking work, right? Because they're done by independent producers. And the same is true for, and then, you've got what all the bigger houses are doing. But what's happening is, once for a while, almost everything that was getting any kind of attention had to come from one of the big studios. And what's happening now is the smaller guys are getting more attention because they're coming through with groundbreaking work. But how they're coming through with groundbreaking work, to Ben's point, is they're getting financial backers who are coming in and giving them the funds and the contacts to really put in a hardcore marketing campaign. And I'm talking about film right now. But so to kind of absorb that for a second, right? And when they're talking about marketing, they're not necessarily just talking about marketing, meaning like you see an ad somewhere. They're talking about marketing to places like Sundance, right? Marketing to the Oscars, marketing to these awards, so that they can then use that as leverage so that it can then be represented at mainstream movie studio or movie theaters, right? And so that you and I will know about an Everything Everywhere All at Once. The exact same thing is true in for books, right? Again, because this is all storytelling. And the reality is that the big three trade publishers, they're looking at what has sold really well for them in the past. And then they're saying, okay, well, if this sold well in the past, then we want to buy more books just like this. And that is what they're going to buy. And they're going to look at what's trending, right? So if they're seeing that from a broader market perspective, like, get back to the female thrillers whose sidekick is a dog, then guess what? They're going to go out there and try and find someone who's written a book or books about a female thriller whose sidekick is a dog. Now, mid-size and small presses, oftentimes what they're looking for is they're just looking for great writing. And that is such a broad generalization, to be honest. And to be clear, we're an indie publisher. Now, when you're saying indie publisher, all that means is that it's not affiliated with one of the big three. And most of the time, it also, well, in my definition of indie publisher, it means that we're self-funded, meaning like you as the author, you're not paying us for anything. We're paying you, right? Again, though, this is going to go back to, we're acquiring stories that we believe in, that fit within our overall mission and vision, just like any other publisher, big house, small house, mid-size, whatever. Now, when you're talking profit margins, Angelique, that is such a hard question to answer, because the reality is it's going to come down to how many books sell. And in today's market, a lot of this is dependent on the author. And I know a lot of authors don't want to hear that. What they want to hear is that, this publisher, and honestly, and this is true for big houses, mid-size, small, you name it. There are actually houses in today's market that if you sign with this publisher, they're going to tell you that you have to do X, Y, and Z in your own publicity, in your own marketing, in your own social media, or they're not going to take you. And that's to help ensure that the book actually sells. You're also going to find publishers that actually unless when they read it, they can tell when they first look at it that this thing is going to sell like the Dickens. You're not going to get a publicist. You're not going to get a hardcore marketing campaign. And again, it's because their expectation is that you are going to bring that to the table. And they won't even sign you unless they know that you have thousands of followers in social media. Again, with the assumption that you're going to bring your own campaign. So that's a very long-winded, complex answer to hopefully your 3 or 4 questions. If you want to ask me anything on the side, you feel free. It looks like you're logging in through LinkedIn. you're more than welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to answer any more questions that you have. And we have one more question, and this is actually going to take us over time, but I want us to make sure we answer everyone's questions. So Kim Brunner asks, what thriller tropes do you love, hate, or see too much of? And then after we answer Kim's questions, then we'll close things out. So how about you, Rod? Is there anything that you feel like you see too much of?
Yeah, I think so. And well, I haven't read 200,000 books, but in what I've read, too often it comes up, and too often one story is very similar to another, where you have werewolves over here, vampires over there, and humans caught in the middle. And one of the worst stories ever, in my opinion, and this is arguable, Twilight. I hated it. Okay? But yeah, that trope for me is just so tired that it's time to put it to rest. I love a good werewolf story. I love vampires. I love human beings. But for heaven's sake, everything tangled up in that particular way is just it's been done. It's tired. That's my thought anyway.
Okay. How about you, Amy?
I don't have any that is tired, but I love a good like fairy tale, a dark fairy tale, especially when it's reimagined like in today. I really, really love that. There's so much that can happen in it.
How about you, Ben?
Yeah, I would agree with the reimagining. It doesn't get old when it's fresh, and like having a character in Cure that can tell you what flavor of pastry you want when you come in the door.
If we all had that, only if we all had that ability.
And by the way, her lineage is that of a werewolf. So. Maybe related, they may not be. Who knows?
And I agree with the whole reimagining. Like there's been a series of books that have come out that are reimagined fairy tales or expand on classic novels that it's just like, this is so cool. The only thing right now that really bugs me is if the voice of the character gets whiny. And I'm like, ugh, like now I'm going to whine, but I can't stand it when someone's whiny. In front of me, and I really don't expect you to sit here and read 300 or 400 pages of a book of someone just being whiny. Like it's like, oh, come on, man, seriously. So anyway, all right. So with that, we're over time. Thank you guys. My God, these were amazing questions. Thank you, Angelique. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Tejas. Thank you, CJ, for joining us, and everyone who's joined us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As always, we love seeing you guys. Join us next week, Thursday. Again, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And